Hi, I'm Greg McLawson, Managing Attorney at Sound Immigration. Today we're going to be talking about two memoranda promulgated by the Department of Homeland Security that talk about new policies that will be implemented in the immigration arena both at United States borders and within the United States. Back on January 25th, President Trump signed two executive orders. One outlined new policies for United States borders, and another immigration enforcement within the United States. As is often the case when a president signs such orders, the immigration agencies then had to decide the specifics of how those orders were going to be implemented. On February 17th, John Kelly, who's the DHS Secretary, signed two memoranda that implement the president's orders. It's important to know that the memoranda do not yet go into effect until they receive final sign-off by the White House, but we think that what we've seen here is probably pretty close to what the end product will look like. First, the memoranda discuss who will be considered a deportation priority under the new administration. As has long been the case, basically any crime-related ground for deportation would make somebody an immigration deportation priority. One thing that changes here, though, is some language that's quite broad. The memoranda say that anyone who has committed acts that constitute a chargeable criminal offense would be a deportation priority. So that's somebody who hasn't actually been convicted of a crime, but has committed conduct that could be a criminal offense. Note that entering the United States without legal paperwork is itself a criminal offense. So the vast majority of the 12 million undocumented individuals in the United States could qualify as deportation priorities under the memoranda. Abuse of public benefits programs also qualifies as a deportation priority. We don't know exactly what that means because immigrants in many states can lawfully qualify for public benefits programs, but we don't know what DHS does and doesn't mean by abuse of those programs. Finally, everybody who is considered a deportation priority is an equal priority for deportation under the memoranda. So once you qualify for any of the bases for being a priority, you're in the same category. Also, the memoranda say that there will no longer be favorable prosecutorial discretion exercised by class. So, for example, the Obama administration had outlined certain categories or classes of immigrants that it considered a very low priority for deportation. But the memoranda says that we will no longer give favorable treatment to those low priority classes. Under the new memoranda, detention of foreign nationals is now mandatory when they are caught as immigration violators, and they must be held until one of these qualifying conditions is met. If they're deported, if an immigration judge orders their release, or if the government is legally required to release them. If the person becomes a citizen or gets a lawful immigration status, they may be released. If they're determined to have credible fear for asylum purposes, they must be released. Or if they're paroled into the U.S., they may be released, which is a very limited form of statutory authority that allows the immigration agencies to let somebody into the United States temporarily, usually to pursue another form of legal status. But for somebody who doesn't meet any of these five grounds, they must be detained until they're deported. It's not clear how this is actually going to work, though, because our immigration detention facilities are already at or past maximum capacity. So it's not clear where we're going to put all these people if they're detained. The memoranda also outline very aggressive criminal and civil immigration prosecutions. One of the most aggressive tacks that's taken is expanding what's known as expedited removal proceedings. It's previously been the case that this form of expedited deportation processing applied only to people who were caught within 100 miles of the United States border and had been here for fewer than 14 days. Expedited deportation now applies to potentially anybody anywhere in the United States who's been here for a period of less than 2 years. So that's a massive expansion of this form of deportation proceedings people in those proceedings have far fewer rights than in normal immigration court proceedings. So it's a big move. It also looks like criminal prosecution may be brought against border crossers much more aggressively than has been done in the past. The memoranda even say that they will seek, potentially, criminal prosecutions of parents who've tried or succeeded in bringing their minor children into the U.S. So if the parents have paid a coyote or somebody to help bring the kids into the United States unlawfully, those parents could be criminally prosecuted. And finally, the memoranda says that the government is to use all of its authority to pursue civil fines from immigration violators, to make them pay financial compensation to the government. As most folks know, the government is stepping up its hiring of immigration officers. Right now, ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, has roughly 7,000 officers. They've been instructed to hire an additional 10,000, so more than doubling their program. CBP, Customs and Border Protection, is supposed to get 5,000 new Marine and air enforcement officers. And also, we are supposed to see the expansion of something called the 287G program. This is a program that has cooperation between local law enforcement agencies and deputizes them essentially to enforce U.S. immigration law. Right now, it's used by a relatively limited number of jurisdictions, but we're supposed to see a dramatic expansion of that, where you would have state and local law enforcement agencies enforcing immigration law. The Department of Homeland Security is supposed to crack down on so-called sanctuary cities. These are cities that have passed policies, formally or informally, not to enforce U.S. immigration law and to shelter undocumented foreign nationals and refugees. DHS is supposed to cut off federal funding to such cities unless the money is going for a law enforcement purpose. Now, it's not clear that the Department of Homeland Security can actually do that under the 10th Amendment to the Constitution. Under federalism principles, the United States government can't simply withhold funding to state and local agencies that's unrelated to the purpose that the money was originally provided for. So, example, if you have money coming from the feds to pay for housing benefits in cities, it's not clear that they could withhold those funds because they don't like immigration-related policies passed by the city. Finally, we are going to see something called the Secure Communities Program being revised. This had been terminated in 2014, but it was a form of cooperation that required law enforcement agencies around the U.S. to provide data to Immigration and Customs Enforcement to make prosecution of criminal non-citizens easier. DHS is supposed to take action against so-called recalcitrant countries. These are countries that are uncooperative in receiving deportees from our country. And it's difficult to know quite what's going to happen to citizens of these countries within the United States, but it's possible that those applying for immigration benefits in the U.S. Could see that process become more difficult if they're on this list of disfavored countries. Lastly, one interesting provision in the memoranda is that Privacy Act protections will no longer apply to anyone if they are not a lawful permanent resident, or LPR, or a U.S. citizen. So temporary visa holders and undocumented foreign nationals will not receive privacy protection relating to their personally identifiable information. Likewise, there will be an office created to assist victims of criminal offenses committed by foreign nationals. And essentially, it looks like victims of those crimes are going to have some form of access to personal identification data about the foreign nationals that committed or were charged with the offense. We hope this has been a helpful overview. You can find more information about Trump administration policies at soundimmigration.com/Trump, where you're welcome to submit questions in the comments to our blog posts.